The long-range sensors of the Xyler research vessel beeped frantically as the ship approached the uncharted planet designated XG-884. Dr. Eris Thorne, the elderly Cathar chief scientist, chittered nervously as he examined the readouts. His exoskeleton plates clicked together as he turned to his security officer. "These readings cannot be correct, Lyra. The gravitational pull is 15% above galactic standard. The atmospheric composition contains at least 3 gases that are toxic to most sentient species. And the radiation levels." He trailed off, his compound eyes widening in shock. Lieutenant Lyra Vex, a younger Cathar with a more vibrant blue carapace, leaned forward, trying to maintain her professional composure despite the obvious concern in her posture. "What about the radiation levels, Doctor?" "They're off the charts. Solar radiation alone would kill most known species within hours without protective gear. And these magnetic storms..." Dr. Thorne's antennae quivered. "They occur with such frequency and intensity that they would disrupt most standard technology." The ship continued its approach through the outer atmosphere, buffeted by winds strong enough to make even the advanced stabilizers of the Xyler struggle. Through the viewport, the crew could see dark, ominous storm clouds crackling with electricity that dwarfed anything in the Galactic Alliance database. In the biosphere, Dr. Thorne continued, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "The preliminary scans show flora with toxicity levels that would be immediately fatal to Cathar physiology. The fauna, predators of sizes that shouldn't be evolutionary possible. Everything on this planet seems designed to kill." Lyra's mandibles tightened in what passed for a Cathar grimace. "So we're looking at a high-class Deathworld then? Class 10? Maybe 12. Dr. Thorne shook his head slowly, the motion deliberate and grave. "No, Lieutenant. After compiling all environmental factors, XG-884 registers as a Class 15 Deathworld. The highest classification possible. A planet where, by all scientific understanding, complex intelligent life should be evolutionarily impossible." A collective gasp went through the bridge crew. Most had never even heard of a Class 15 designation outside of theoretical discussions. Such planets were thought to be rare myths, the boogeymen of space exploration. "We should notify the Galactic Alliance immediately and depart," said another scientist, already backing away from her console. Dr. Thorne nodded in agreement, reaching for the communication controls when the sensor specialist let out a startled cry. "Doctor, I'm detecting artificial structures on the surface." "Impossible," Thorne replied. "Your instruments must be malfunctioning." "No, sir. Multiple confirmations. There are definite signs of a technological civilization down there. Cities, energy signatures, transportation networks. Someone, or something, is living on this death world." Lyra moved to the sensor station, her training overriding her fear. "That's not just evidence of habitation," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "These are signs of a thriving technological society." Dr. Thorne's antennae drooped in shocked disbelief. "But nothing could evolve to survive such conditions." "Nothing." The communications officer raised a limb. "Sir, Galactic Alliance protocol is clear. Any discovery of a previously unknown technological civilization requires immediate investigation and contact assessment, regardless of environmental conditions." The elderly scientist looked around at his crew, then back at the nightmare world spinning below them. "Very well," he said reluctantly. "Prepare a landing team. Maximum environmental protection protocols. Lieutenant Vex, select your security detail carefully. This mission is..." He paused, searching for the right words. "Unprecedented." As the crew scattered to prepare, Lyra found herself staring at the view screen, at the swirling storms and hostile landscape of Exit 884. Who, or what, could possibly call such a hellscape home? And more importantly, what kind of beings would they turn out to be? The landing shuttle shuddered violently as it descended through XG 884's turbulent atmosphere. Inside, the Cathar expedition team was sealed in the most advanced environmental suits their civilization had developed triple-layered exoskeletons reinforced with energy fields specifically calibrated to block the planet's intense radiation. Dr. Thorne clutched his seat restraints, eyes tightly shut. "The shuttle integrity is holding at 82%, he announced, voice quavering slightly. That's within acceptable parameters." Lyra, by contrast, maintained a rigid posture, though her inner anxiety betrayed itself through the rapid clicking of her mandibles inside her helmet. "Remember the briefing, everyone," she instructed the 5-member landing team. "We observe only. No engagement with any life forms unless absolutely necessary for our safety." The shuttle broke through the cloud layer, revealing a landscape that seemed designed by a sadistic deity. Jagged mountains with exposed veins of what appeared to be radioactive minerals. Forests of towering plants with thorns larger than a Cthar arm. In the distance, a storm system that made the clouds above look gentle by comparison. "Scan for the nearest settlement," Dr. Thorne instructed the pilot, who was frantically working the controls as wind shear threatened to tear the shuttle apart. "Approximately 15 kilometers southeast," the pilot responded. "There's a large concentration of structures that appears to be a city of some kind." The shuttle banked, struggling against winds that screamed past at velocities that would strip flesh from bone for anyone unfortunate enough to be caught outside. As they approached, the team fell silent in collective awe. Rising from what must have once been a coastal area stood a city, a genuine metropolis of metal and stone. Unlike the sleek, organic architecture of Cthar settlements or the crystalline spires of other Alliance members, this city appeared brutally functional. Buildings were squat, reinforced, often partially embedded into the ground itself. Massive barriers surrounded portions of the city, clearly designed to withstand the planet's punishing environment. "Energy readings are substantial," noted the science officer. "They've harnessed geothermal power. And something else. They're somehow drawing energy from the magnetic storms themselves." "Life signs?" Lyra asked, her professional demeanor partially recovered. "Abundant. Thousands." But the officer paused, recalibrating her instruments. "The readings are strange. Unlike anything in our database." The shuttle descended toward what appeared to be a landing area near the city's edge, choosing a flat expanse of reinforced material that bore markings suggesting it was designed for aircraft. As they touched down, the vessel's external sensors relayed an alarming update. The ambient temperature was 40 degrees higher than Cthar comfort levels. Atmospheric pressure was crushing, and the radiation would deteriorate their suits' effectiveness within hours rather than the expected days. "Remember," Dr. Thorne said as they prepared to disembark, "we represent the Galactic Alliance. First contact protocol dictates." He was interrupted by a proximity alarm. Something was approaching the shuttle. Through the viewport, they watched as a ground vehicle approached, a rugged transport with massive wheels and a reinforced cabin. What emerged from it, however, sent ripples of shock through the Cthar team. The creatures were bipedal, with no visible exoskeleton or protective carapace. They wore simple clothing that left shocking amounts of their soft-looking outer tissue exposed to the elements. No breathing apparatus. No radiation shielding. Just thin coverings that appeared to be more for modesty than protection. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Thorne. "They're completely exposed to the environment. They should be dead within minutes." One of the creatures approached the shuttle directly, making what appeared to be a welcoming gesture. It had a tuft of dark fiber on the top of its head, facial features that included forward-facing eyes, and a mouth that was currently curved upward at the edges. "They want us to come out," Lyra observed. "Doctor, should we?" "We must," Thorne replied, though his voice conveyed his terror. "Alliance protocol is clear." With trembling limbs, the Cthar team cycled through the airlock and stepped onto the surface of XG-884. Their suits immediately began feeding them warnings about environmental hazards and countdown timers for safe exposure. The gravity pulled at them uncomfortably, making each step an effort. The bipedal creature approached them, still making that upward curve with its mouth parts. It was taller than the Cthar by at least a head, with a sturdy build that nonetheless looked fragile without an exoskeleton. "Welcome to Earth," it said in a deep, resonant voice that somehow carried over the howling wind. "I'm Captain Jax Rourke. You folks look like you're having a rough time in those fancy suits. Why don't you come inside where it's comfortable? Storm's about to hit anyway." The Cthar team froze in collective shock. Not only was this creature surviving on the surface of a Class 15 death world without protection, but it also seemed to consider the current conditions mild enough to stand around making conversation. And a storm was coming that was apparently worse than this? Dr. Thorne's scientific curiosity finally overcame his fear. He stepped forward on shaking legs. "Greetings. I am Dr. Eris Thorne of the Galactic Alliance Research Vessel Xyler. We come in peace." The creature, Jax, let out a strange barking sound that the Cthar translators couldn't decipher. "Of course you do. You folks look like you'd snap in half if I shook your hand too hard. Come on now. That's not regular thunder you're hearing. That's a magnetic storm front. And trust me, you don't want your ship out when it hits." As if to punctuate his statement, a flash of purple-tinged lightning struck a nearby mountain peak, causing the ground to tremble. The Cthar team huddled closer together instinctively. "The shuttle," Lyra managed to say. "Our equipment. We'll help you secure it," Jax replied with casual confidence. "But right now, we need to get you folks inside. Dr. Evelyn Hayes is waiting to meet you, and she's been excited ever since our sensors picked up your approach." He paused, looking at their bulky environmental suits with that strange mouth curve again. "Though she might be disappointed you're all wrapped up like preservation packages. She's been wanting to see what you look like." Another bipedal approached, this one smaller with longer head fibers. It waved enthusiastically. "The hangar is prepped, Captain. We can tow their shuttle inside, once they're clear." Jax nodded. "Thanks, Riley." He turned back to the Cthar. "Well, coming inside, or would you prefer to see what happens when a Class 3 magnetic storm hits electronic equipment?" Dr. Thorne looked at Lyra, who gave the Cthar equivalent of a shrug, a slight raising and lowering of her upper limbs. "We accept your hospitality," Dr. Thorne said formally, even as another lightning bolt struck close enough to make his antennae tingle inside his helmet. "Smart choice," Jax said, turning and gesturing for them to follow. "Welcome to Sydney Outpost, one of humanity's finest death world accommodations. You're in for quite an education, friends." As the Cthar followed, on unsteady legs, each step laborious in the crushing gravity, they watched in disbelief as their hosts moved with easy confidence, completely unconcerned by the environment that the Alliance classified as unsurvivable. Behind them, the storm clouds gathered, flashing with energies that would fry most technological civilizations. And somehow, impossibly, these creatures called it home. The interior of the human settlement was as shocking to the Cthar as the exterior had been. While they had expected some form of heavily shielded, possibly underground bunker to protect against the lethal conditions outside, they instead found themselves in what appeared to be a casual gathering space. Walls of thick, transparent material allowed views of the approaching storm, which humans clustered around to observe with drinks in hand. "Environmental analysis complete," whispered Dr. Thorne's assistant, Ziv, over their private communication channel. "The interior atmosphere contains oxygen levels that would be toxic to Cthar physiology, ambient radiation that exceeds safe levels by 300%, and are those open flames?" He pointed to what appeared to be decorative fire elements in several corners of the room. Lyra's security training kicked in as she scanned for threats, but found her assessment protocols completely inadequate. By Cthar standards, everything was a threat. The environment itself was a continuous assault on their existence. Yet these humans moved through it as casually as if they were in a controlled habitat. Captain Rourke led them through the facility, past rooms where humans engaged in activities ranging from what appeared to be scientific research to recreation. One chamber contained humans deliberately exerting themselves, lifting heavy objects repeatedly despite the already crushing gravity. "Our fitness center," Jax explained casually, noticing the Cthar collective stare. "Gotta keep in shape, even out here on the frontier." "You deliberately stress your bodies further?" Lyra couldn't help asking, her scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming her training. Jax's face made that upward curve again. Of course. Use it or lose it, as we say. The human body adapts to the demands placed on it. A human child, at least the Kthar assumed it was a juvenile based on size, ran past them, carrying what appeared to be a small predator with sharp teeth and claws. "Timmy, no running with the dog in the main corridor," Jack called out. The child slowed reluctantly. "Is that a captive predator species?" Dr. Thorne asked, his scientific curiosity piqued despite his terror. Jax made the barking sound again, which the Kthar were beginning to understand might be laughter. "That's just a beagle. A pet. Companion animal. Mostly harmless, except to your shoes if you don't walk them enough." The revelations continued as they were led into what appeared to be a conference room. There, a human female with light-colored head fibers pulled back from her face stood up eagerly from a table covered in displays and instruments. "You're here. Fantastic. I'm Dr. Evelyn Hayes, xenobiologist and cultural liaison for Sydney Outpost." Her voice contained an enthusiasm that seemed inappropriate given that she was casually inhaling levels of oxygen that would cause a Kthar's respiratory system to combust. "Please, sit down if you're comfortable. Those suits look awfully cumbersome." Lyra noticed Dr. Thorne's hesitation and took the initiative, carefully lowering herself into one of the seats. The furniture, designed for human physiology, was awkward for Kthar anatomy, but manageable. "I have so many questions," Dr. Hayes continued, barely pausing for breath. "You're the first extraterrestrial visitors we've had in decades. The last group came in a ship that couldn't handle our magnetic fields and had to leave within hours." Dr. Thorne finally found his voice. "We also have many questions, Dr. Hayes, beginning with how your species survives in conditions that our scientific understanding classifies as universally lethal." Hayes' expression shifted to one of surprise. "Lethal? Oh, you mean the environment. Earth is just home to us. We evolved here, after all. Our bodies are specifically adapted to these conditions. But the radiation alone," Ziv began. "Oh, we've developed cellular repair mechanisms to handle most of the radiation damage," Hayes said with a casual wave of her hand. "The thicker atmosphere actually shields us from the worst of it. As for the gravity, our musculoskeletal system is designed for it. I understand it must be quite taxing for you. Your species evolved on a lower gravity world, I assume." Dr. Thorne nodded slowly inside his helmet. "Indeed. The standard Kthar homeworld has approximately 60% of the gravitational pull we're experiencing now." "Fascinating." Hayes' eyes lit up. "And your exoskeletons, are they natural or technological adaptations?" "The mix of biological and mechanical elements is quite sophisticated. These are environmental suits," Lyra explained, gesturing to her protective gear. "Our natural exoskeletons are much lighter and more flexible. These are designed to protect us from environments like yours." Hayes looked momentarily embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I assumed they were part of your natural physiology. Would you be more comfortable if we adjusted the environmental controls in this room? We can reduce the oxygen content, filter some of the radiation, perhaps increase the humidity." The Kthar team exchanged glances. The offer was thoughtful, but highlighted just how fundamentally incompatible their physiologies were. "That would be appreciated, but unlikely to make sufficient difference," Dr. Thorne explained. "Your world is..." "To be frank, Dr. Hayes, your planet is classified in our system as a Class 15 Deathworld, the highest possible danger rating. A world where intelligent life should not be able to evolve." There was a moment of silence before Captain Rourke let out another burst of that barking laughter. "A death world? That's what you call Earth?" Hayes seemed equally amused, but tried to maintain professional composure. "Captain, please. Our guests are clearly from an environment very different from ours." She turned back to the Kthar. "What you call a death world, we simply call home. Every species evolves to thrive in its native environment. But the extremes," protested Ziv. "The atmospheric toxins, the pathogens, the predator species, all part of the complex ecosystem we evolved within," Hayes replied. "In fact, our bodies rely on many of what you might call pathogens for normal function. We have more bacterial cells in our bodies than human cells. The Cathar collectively shuddered inside their suits. Jax, who had been leaning against the wall, straightened up. You know what might help? A tour of the outpost. Show you how we live here. Might make more sense than talking theory. Hayes nodded enthusiastically. Excellent idea. Would you be interested in seeing more of our settlement? Before Dr. Thorne could respond, a human burst into the room, face showing clear signs of distress. Captain, we got incoming. Stryker Corp ships just entered orbit, and they're not responding to hails. Jax's demeanor changed instantly, the casual posture replaced by alert tension. How many? 3 cruisers and what looks like a mining barge. They're already deploying shuttles. Alert status. Get everyone to defensive positions. He turned to the Cathar. I apologize for the interruption, but we have an unwelcome situation developing. Dr. Thorne's antennae quivered with concern. Stryker Corporation? You know of them. Jax's face hardened. Corporate raiders. They technically operate within Galactic Alliance territory, but focus on uninhabited planets for resource extraction. They've tried here before. Claimed they didn't realize Earth was populated. That's impossible, Lyra objected. Any standard scan would detect your civilization. Not if they conveniently malfunction their sensors, Hayes said grimly. Plausible. Deniability. They extract resources, and if anyone objects, they claim ignorance until forced to leave. Jax was already moving toward the door. Dr. Hayes, get our guests somewhere safe. I need to coordinate the defense. Defense. Lyra's security training kicked in. Against Galactic Alliance ships? Stryker isn't Alliance military, Jax replied tersely. They're corporate mercenaries with legal teams. And they don't care who gets hurt as long as the quarterly profits stay up. Through the transparent walls, the Cathar could see humans rushing to defensive positions. Unlike the casual manner they displayed earlier, they now moved with military precision, carrying what were obviously weapons. This is concerning, Dr. Thorne said quietly to Lyra. Alliance regulations forbid interfering in conflicts between other species, but if Stryker Corporation is violating extraction protocols. Lyra's mandibles clicked in frustration. Our primary directive is observation and contact, not engagement. But I agree. This situation complicates matters. Hayes, who had been listening intently to something through a communication device, turned to them with grave concern. It appears Stryker has begun unauthorized extraction in the Western Reserve. That's one of our primary agricultural areas, and they're deploying heavy machinery with complete disregard for the ecosystem. Agricultural areas? Ziv asked. You grow food in this environment? Specially adapted crops, yes, Hayes replied distractedly. The Western Reserve contains carefully balanced biodomes that took decades to perfect. She looked directly at Dr. Thorne. If they disrupt those systems, thousands of people could face food shortages. The elderly Cathar scientist looked conflicted, his antennae twitching in agitation. This is a complex ethical situation. Galactic protocols dictate non-interference. Lyra stepped forward. Doctor, with respect, Stryker Corporation operates under Alliance jurisdiction. If they're violating extraction protocols, especially on an inhabited world, that falls under our mandate to report and potentially intervene. Intervene? How? Thorne asked, his voice rising in pitch. We're a scientific expedition, not a military force. We have communication capabilities and diplomatic authority, Lyra countered. And our ship carries standard defensive measures. Hayes watched this exchange with growing hope. Would you be willing to help us? Stryker has ignored our communications for years, claiming we're just primitive locals with no standing in galactic law. But they would have to acknowledge official Alliance representatives. Dr. Thorne's inner conflict was visible even through his environmental suit. I need to consult with our ship. There's no time, Jax said, returning to the room. They've already deployed excavation mechs, the kind that strip mine everything in their path. He looked directly at the Cathar. I understand you have protocols. We respect that. But right now, people's lives and livelihoods are at stake. Lyra and Dr. Thorne exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. We will contact our ship, Lyra decided. At minimum, we can formally document Stryker's violations of Alliance protocols and transmit evidence to Alliance authorities. Hayes looked relieved. Thank you. Even just having witnesses from the Alliance could make a difference. Jax nodded gratefully. We're deploying our defenders now. We can take you to a safe observation point where you can document what's happening without being in danger. One moment, Dr. Thorne said, raising a limb. If we do this, if we bear witness to these events, we need to understand exactly what we're seeing. What defenses does your settlement have against corporate extraction teams with advanced technology? Jax and Hayes exchanged a look that the Cathar couldn't interpret. We have our ways, Jax said finally. Humanity has survived on this death world for hundreds of thousands of years. We've learned to use what others would consider hazards to our advantage. As if to emphasize his point, a distant rumble shook the building, but it wasn't from the approaching storm. It was the sound of Stryker Corporation's machinery beginning its destructive work on humanity's home. The observation point turned out to be a reinforced bunker set into the side of a cliff overlooking the Western Reserve. Through armored viewport slits, the Cathar team watched as massive Stryker excavation mesh tore into the landscape. Each machine stood several stories tall, with multiple articulated arms ending in various cutting, drilling, and collection apparatuses. Behind them, automated processing units were already refining whatever resources they were extracting. That's a Tilium deposit thereafter, Hayes explained, pointing to a purplish-blue vein of mineral exposed by the mesh. Rare in most of the galaxy, but relatively common in Earth's crust due to our unique geological history. Tilium is valuable for certain advanced propulsion systems, Dr. Thorne noted. But this extraction method is horrifically destructive and clearly violates Section 47 of the Alliance Resource Management Protocols. Lyra was already recording the scene with the documentation equipment built into her suit. The violation is clear. But what confuses me is why Stryker believes they can act with such impunity. Surely they must know this will eventually reach Alliance authorities? Jax, who had joined them after coordinating the human defense, looked grim. By the time Alliance bureaucracy processes the complaint and dispatches investigators, they'll have already stripped this area bare and moved on. The fines are just a cost of doing business for them. Another human, a muscular male with facial scars that the Cathar found alarming, approached Jax. Defensive teams are in position, Captain. Environmental manipulators are ready on your command. Environmental manipulators? Ziv inquired. Hayes gave that now familiar mouth curve. As the captain said, we've learned to use our environment to our advantage. Earth may be a death world to you, but to Stryker's equipment, it's just as hostile. Through the viewport, they could see human defenders moving into position. Unlike the Cathar's expectations of primitive resistance, the humans were deploying what appeared to be sophisticated technology, though notably different in design philosophy from Alliance standard. Where Alliance tech tended toward elegance and efficiency, these human devices were rugged, overbuilt, and clearly designed to function in Earth's hostile conditions. Activating electromagnetic pulse generators in Sector 7, announced the scarred human. Immediately, several of the smaller Stryker excavators in that area stuttered and failed, their systems disrupted by a precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse that somehow didn't affect the human equipment. Our tech is hardened against electromagnetic interference, Hayes explained, noting the Cathar's surprise. Living on a planet with constant magnetic storms required us to develop shielded systems from the beginning. Clever, admitted Lyra, but Stryker's larger units appear unaffected. That was just the opening move, Jax said, keying his communication device. Phase 2. Release the wildlife. For a moment, Dr. Thorne thought he had misheard. Release wildlife? As a defensive measure? Then he saw it. From concealed positions around the extraction zone, humans were opening large containment units. What emerged made his exoskeleton feel suddenly too tight. Massive six-legged creatures, each roughly the size of a small transport vehicle, scuttled toward the Stryker equipment. Their armored carapaces glistened metallically in the harsh sunlight, and enormous pincers clicked menacingly. Neo-titanium beetles, Hayes said with evident pride. Native to the Australian continent. Their exoskeletons are infused with natural metallic compounds that make them nearly impervious to standard weapons. They're attracted to the vibrations of drilling equipment. The Cathar watched in fascinated horror as the beetles swarmed the nearest excavator. The machine's operators, clearly panicked, tried to brush them off with auxiliary arms, but the creature's pincers began methodically severing hydraulic lines and tearing into exposed components. Most off-world technology isn't designed to withstand Earth's wildlife, Jax explained, especially not the specimens we've selectively bred for defense. Stryker security forces were now deploying from their shuttles, wearing environmental suits that looked similar to the Cathar's but clearly designed for combat. They carried energy weapons that they began discharging at the beetles, with minimal effect. Incoming, warned the scarred human. Stryker dropships, bearing 330. Looks like they're bringing in the heavy hitters. Jax nodded grimly. Time for Phase 3. Dr. Hayes, would you do the honors? Hayes activated a control panel that had been concealed beneath a natural-looking rock formation. Atmospheric manipulation system engaged. Localized pressure differential building. The Cathar scientists watched in amazement as the storm clouds they had noticed earlier began to move. Not with the natural patterns of weather, but with evident purpose, gathering and concentrating directly above the Stryker operation. You control the weather? Dr. Thorne couldn't keep the astonishment from his voice. Not control, exactly, Hayes corrected. Influence. Guide. Earth's weather systems are too powerful to truly control, but we've learned to nudge them in useful directions. As they watched, the storm system intensified with unnatural speed. Lightning. Not the standard electrical discharge the Cathar were familiar with, but the strange purple-tinged bolts they had observed. Earlier, began to strike with increasing frequency around the Stryker equipment. Magnetically guided plasma discharges, Hayes explained. The storm was coming anyway. We're just helping it target more precisely. The Stryker dropships, attempting to land reinforcements, suddenly found themselves battling winds that seemed to increase specifically in their flight paths. One ship, caught in a particularly violent gust, was slammed against the side of an excavator, damaging both. Lyra continued documenting everything, her security training momentarily overridden by sheer amazement. This is unprecedented. You've weaponized your environment. We've adapted to it, Jack corrected, and in doing so, learned how to use it. Stryker comes from worlds where nature is something to be conquered and exploited. Here on Earth, that mindset is a fatal weakness. Through their viewports, the Cathar could see the tide turning. The combination of electromagnetic disruption, biological attacks, and weather manipulation had thrown the Stryker operation into chaos. Several of their larger machines were damaged or immobilized, and their personnel were retreating to shuttles. But just as it seemed the humans had prevailed, a new threat emerged from the largest Stryker vessel. A massive combat mech, at least 3 times the size of the excavators, descended on powerful thrusters. Unlike the mining equipment, this was clearly a military-grade machine, heavily armored and bristling with weapon systems. That's a Devastator-class battle platform, Lyra said, her professional assessment cutting through her amazement. Those are restricted under Alliance conventions. Stryker shouldn't have access to military hardware of that grade. The massive mech landed with ground-shaking force and immediately began firing wide-spectrum energy beams that cut through the swarms of beetles. Its armored carapace seemed impervious to the lightning strikes, and its stabilization systems kept it upright despite the increasingly violent winds. They've adapted since their last visit, Jax noted grimly. That thing's shielded against our usual tricks. From the battle platform, a magnified voice boomed. This is Director Kale of Stryker Corporation. Your resistance is unauthorized and illegal. This planet has been designated for resource extraction under Galactic Alliance Exemption Code 15C, Uninhabited Dangerous World Classification. Surrender immediately or face elimination. Lyra's mandibles clicked in anger. That's a complete fabrication of Alliance law. There is no such exemption. Dr. Thorne, despite his fear, straightened his posture. Lieutenant Vex is correct. This is a flagrant violation. We must intervene more directly. Hayes looked at the Kthar with surprise. You're willing to directly oppose them? I thought your protocols. Alliance scientific vessels are authorized to intervene when witnessing clear legal violations, especially those threatening sentient life, Dr. Thorne stated firmly. Lieutenant Vex, please contact the Xyler. Request emergency intervention protocols. Lyra immediately began the transmission, but the scarred human shook his head. The storm is disrupting long-range communications. Your signal won't penetrate the ionospheric interference. Then we must find another way, Dr. Thorne said, with a determination that surprised even himself. The Devastator is a prohibited weapons platform, and Director Kale is making false claims about Alliance law. Jax studied the elderly scientist with newfound respect. What do you propose, Doctor? Eris Thorne, who had spent most of his career in laboratories and lecture halls, found himself formulating a battle plan. The Devastator's primary weakness is its power distribution network. The energy requirements for its weapons systems create vulnerabilities in specific junctures. If you could deliver a precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse to coordinates I could provide. Hayes was already nodding. We can modify our EMP generators for a concentrated burst, but someone would need to get close enough to target it precisely. I'll go, Lyra volunteered immediately. My suit has targeting systems that can interface with your equipment. It's too dangerous, Dr. Thorne protested. The radiation levels alone are within my suit's tolerance for short exposures, Lyra finished. This is why I'm here, Doctor. Security and protection. Jax was already moving toward the exit. I'll accompany Lieutenant Vex. My knowledge of the terrain will be useful. And I'll coordinate from here, Hayes added, turning to her control systems. We'll need to time this perfectly with the next major lightning convergence to maximize the EMP effect. As the humans rapidly reconfigured their equipment, Dr. Thorne pulled Lyra aside. Are you certain about this, Lieutenant? This goes well beyond our mission parameters. Lyra's compound eyes met his. Directly. Doctor, in all my years of training, I was taught that the primary purpose of the Galactic Alliance was to protect life and knowledge throughout the galaxy. These humans have created a civilization in conditions we thought impossible. They represent knowledge we never imagined existed. If that's not worth protecting, what is? The elderly scientist was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're right, of course. Be careful, Lyra. And I'm proud of you. Outside, the storm had intensified to levels that would have terrified the Kthar under normal circumstances. Now, it was their unlikely ally. Jax led Lyra through concealed trenches and natural formations that provided cover from the Devastator sensors. Your people adapted to this environment with remarkable ingenuity, Lyra observed as they crawled through a passage reinforced with some kind of fibrous material. Necessity, Jax replied simply. Earth doesn't forgive mistakes. You either adapt or you die. He paused at a junction, checking a device on his wrist. The Devastator is engaging our eastern defensive line. They're holding it off, but not for long. They emerged from the passage at a position that gave them a clear view of the battle. The massive mech was systematically destroying the human defensive positions, its weapons cutting through reinforced barriers with ease. The humans were falling back in good order, but they were clearly outmatched by the military hardware. There, Jax pointed to a location at the base of the mech. That access panel. It's where the main power conduits would be routed, based on standard designs. Lyra's targeting system confirmed his assessment. Correct, but we'll need to get closer for the EMP to penetrate the shielding. Jax pulled a rugged-looking device from his pack, the modified EMP generator. This has been calibrated to Dr. Hayes' specifications. One shot, maximum power. After that, the circuitry will fry. Lyra took the device, integrating it with her suit systems. I calculate an 87% chance of success if we can get within 50 meters. But the approach? Leave that to me, Jack said with a grim smile. He activated his communication device. Hayes, We're in position. Initiate protocol, Thunderstrike. Acknowledge, came Hayes' voice. Atmospheric manipulation at maximum. You'll have your distraction in 30 seconds. Jax turned to Lyra. When the lightning hits, their sensors will be momentarily overloaded. That's our window. Stay close to me and move exactly where I step. The ground isn't stable everywhere. Lyra nodded, forcing her fear down. She had trained for hazardous situations, but nothing in her training had prepared her for intentionally running toward a military-grade battle platform on a Class 15 Deathworld during a magnetically enhanced thunderstorm. Now, Jax shouted as multiple lightning bolts simultaneously struck the area around the Devastator, creating a deafening thunderclap and a blinding flash. They sprinted forward, Lyra struggling against the planet's oppressive gravity, while Jax moved with the easy grace of someone born to this environment. The storm raged around them, but Lyra noticed something remarkable. The lightning seemed to be avoiding their path, striking instead in a pattern that kept the Devastator's attention directed elsewhere. Hayes is guiding the strikes, Jax explained between breaths. Benefit of understanding Earth's magnetic fields. They reached a position behind a fallen excavator, now just 40 meters from the Devastator. Lyra could feel the vibrations through the ground as the massive machine pivoted, searching for new targets. We're in range, she confirmed, raising the EMP device. But I need 15 seconds to calibrate for maximum effect. You've got 10, Jax replied tensely, watching as the Devastator began to turn in their direction. They've spotted us. Lyra worked frantically, her clawed appendages flying over the controls as she synchronized the device with the planet's magnetic field, using the storm's energy to amplify the pulse. Almost. There. The Devastator's weapons systems swiveled toward them, energy building visibly in its main cannon. Down! Jax shouted, tackling Lyra just as the cannon fired. The energy beam passed overhead, melting the remains of the excavator into slag. The heat was so intense that Lyra's suit immediately triggered cooling protocols. Ready, she called, raising the device again. Fire, Jax ordered. Lyra activated the EMP, which emitted not the pulse she expected, but a narrow, concentrated beam of electromagnetic energy that struck the Devastator precisely at the junction Jax had identified. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if synchronized with the planet itself, a massive lightning bolt struck the exact same spot, using the EMP beam as a conductor. The electricity arced through the Devastator's systems, amplified by the EMP's disruption of its shielding. The massive machine froze mid-motion, its weapons powering down as critical systems failed. Emergency lights flickered on its surface, and panels blew outward from overloaded circuits. From the Devastator's command module, a hatch opened, and a figure emerged. A tall, sleek being with metallic skin that the Cthar recognized as a Viridian, a species known for their corporate ruthlessness. This is Director Kale, the figure announced, voice amplified even without the mech systems. This assault on Stryker property will be reported to Alliance authorities. You have violated. Save it, Kale. Jax called back. We have Alliance representatives right here who have documented your entire operation, including your use of prohibited military hardware and false claims about Alliance law. Kale's metallic features contorted in what might have been surprise or anger. What Alliance representatives? This is clearly a desperate ploy by Primitive. I am Dr. Eris Thorne, senior researcher of the Galactic Alliance Scientific Corps, announced a new voice. To Lyra's shock, Dr. Thorne himself had emerged from the bunker and was approaching with surprising steadiness despite the gravity. And I personally confirm that Stryker Corporation is in violation of no fewer than 17 Alliance protocols, including the Military Hardware Prohibition Act and the Sentient Species Protection Treaty. Kale's confidence visibly faltered. Dr. Thorne, the Cthar biologist? What are you doing on this death world? Observing a remarkable species that your corporation was planning to eliminate for profit, Dr. Thorne replied, his scientific authority evident despite his physical frailty on this world. I have already transmitted preliminary findings to the Xyler. Even if your jammers blocked our direct communication, the ship's protocols will automatically alert Alliance enforcement within hours of lost contact. This was a bluff, Lyra knew, but a convincing one. Kale seemed to deflate slightly. We were unaware of official Alliance presence, the director attempted. Our surveys indicated no registered sentient species. We would, of course, have altered our approach had we known. Your sensors detected our ship's approach, Lyra interjected, and these settlements are clearly visible from orbit. Your claim of ignorance is not credible. Around them, human defenders had emerged from cover and were surrounding the disabled Devastator. The storm, seemingly responding to Hayes' distant commands, was beginning to abate, though lightning still occasionally struck near Stryker's remaining equipment. Kale's metallic face shifted through several expressions before settling on cold resignation. Very well. Stryker Corporation will withdraw pending formal assessment of this planet's status. But this isn't over. The resources here are under the protection of Earth's inhabitants and now the official notice of the Galactic Alliance, Dr. Thorne finished firmly. I suggest you depart before the next magnetic storm. They're quite frequent here, I understand, and your ships don't appear designed to withstand them. As if on cue, the distant rumble of thunder emphasized his point. Director Kale's eyes narrowed, but he gave a curt nod before returning to the Devastator's hatch. Within minutes, emergency protocols had activated the mech's auxiliary power, allowing it to limp back toward the Stryker ships. Across the extraction zone, Stryker personnel were hastily abandoning equipment too damaged to salvage, retreating to their shuttles. Jax watched them go with grim satisfaction. That was impressive, Doctor. I didn't expect you to come out into the field. Dr. Thorne's antennae quivered in what might have been embarrassment. Neither did I, but I found I could not remain in safety while others took risks on behalf of what was right. He turned to Lyra. Lieutenant Vex performed admirably. Her actions today exemplify the true spirit of the Alliance. Lyra felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with her military training. Thank you, Doctor. Though I must acknowledge Captain Rourke's assistance. Without his knowledge of the environment, we would have failed. Jax waved away the compliment. We all did what was necessary. That's how you survive on a death world. He paused, looking up at the clearing sky where the Stryker ships were already beginning their ascent to orbit. Though I suspect they'll be back eventually. Different name, different approach, but the same objective. Perhaps, Dr. Thorne agreed. But next time, they will find the planet officially registered in Alliance databases with full protective status. And perhaps, he hesitated, then continued with more confidence. Perhaps they will also find a permanent Alliance scientific outpost established here to study this remarkable world and its even more remarkable inhabitants. Hayes, who had joined them from the bunker, broke into a wide smile. You consider establishing a permanent presence here, despite the environmental challenges? Dr. Thorne looked around at the landscape that hours earlier had terrified him. It was still objectively hostile by Cthar standards. The gravity still crushed, the radiation still bombarded, the atmosphere still contained toxins. But now he saw something else. The adaptation, the ingenuity, the resilience that had allowed humans to not merely survive but thrive here. Some knowledge is worth the discomfort of adaptation, he said finally. And I believe humanity has much to teach the galaxy about thriving in environments we previously thought impossible. In orbit, aboard the Xyler, the Cthar diplomatic team that had arrived in response to Dr. Thorne's reports shifted uncomfortably in their environmental suits. Through the viewport, they could see the blue-green world spinning below, a Class 15 death world that, according to all scientific understanding, should not harbor intelligent life. Yet there stood Dr. Eris Thorne, once the most cautious and protocol-bound researcher in the Alliance Scientific Corps, calmly explaining the terms of the historic First Contact Agreement with Earth. Beside him stood Lieutenant Lyra Vex, now promoted to Security Chief for the permanent Alliance outpost being established in the Sydney settlement. You must understand, Dr. Thorne was saying to the diplomatic team, the humans require special considerations when integrating into Galactic Alliance structures. Their physiology is uniquely adapted to conditions most alliance species find lethal. But this adaptation represents not a limitation, but an extraordinary opportunity. The lead diplomat, still struggling with the concept, gestured to the document before them. This proposal suggests allowing humans to serve on Alliance vessels. The environmental modifications alone would be prohibitively expensive. On the contrary, Lyra interjected, humans require far fewer life support modifications than most species. They can tolerate radiation levels, gravitational variances, and atmospheric conditions that would incapacitate most Alliance personnel. They're the perfect crew members for exploration into previously inaccessible environments. And their scientific insights have already proven valuable, Dr. Thorne added. Dr. Hayes' research on adaptive biology has implications for medical science throughout the Alliance. Captain Rourke's expertise in surviving extreme conditions will revolutionize our emergency protocols. Through another viewport, they could see a human shuttle approaching the Xyler. Unlike the sleek Alliance vessels or the utilitarian striker ships, the human craft was distinctive, rugged, overbuilt, clearly designed to withstand punishment that would tear other ships apart. It was an apt metaphor for humanity itself. There will be challenges, Dr. Thorne acknowledged. Cultural misunderstandings, physiological incompatibilities. But the Galactic Alliance was founded on the principle that diversity creates strength, and humanity represents a form of diversity we never imagined possible. As the human shuttle docked with careful precision to the Xyler's modified bay, the diplomatic team prepared to greet the first official human delegation to the Galactic Alliance. Among them would be Jax Rourke, now appointed as Earth's security liaison, and Dr. Evelyn Hayes, heading the scientific exchange program. The lead diplomat, finally accepting the inevitable, signed the preliminary agreement. Very well, Dr. Thorne. We will recommend Earth's admission to the Alliance Council, though I suspect many members will have difficulty believing your reports about human resilience. Dr. Thorne's antennae twitched in what the humans had taught him was the Cthar equivalent of smile. Then I suggest inviting them to visit Earth personally. Nothing convinces like first-hand experience. Though perhaps with better environmental suits than we initially brought, Lyra added dryly, remembering how quickly their original equipment had deteriorated under Earth conditions. As the airlock cycled and the human delegation prepared to board, Dr. Thorne reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. What had begun as a routine survey of an apparently uninhabitable world had transformed his understanding of life itself. The universe, it seemed, was far more diverse and adaptable than even the Alliance's most learned scientists had imagined. And humanity, those improbable inhabitants of a Class 15 Deathworld, were about to teach the galaxy just how limited that imagination had been. The airlock opened, and Captain Jax Rourke stepped through, somehow looking both formal in his ceremonial attire and completely at ease in an environment that should have been alien to him. Behind him came Dr. Hayes and several other humans, each moving with the casual confidence of beings who had evolved to survive challenges that would kill most sentient species in minutes. "Welcome aboard the Xyler," Dr. Thorne said formally. "And welcome to the beginning of Earth's journey in the Galactic Alliance." Jack smiled, extending a hand in the human greeting gesture that the Cthar had learned to approximate with their upper limbs. "We're looking forward to it, Doctor. For what you've told us about the galaxy, it sounds like you folks might need some people who know how to handle a little adversity." As the human and Cthar leaders exchanged their ceremonial greetings, through the viewport behind them, Earth continued its rotation. Storm systems swirled across its surface, radiation belts shimmered in its upper atmosphere, and massive tectonic plates shifted imperceptibly, all part of the dynamic system that had forged humanity into what they were. From this distance, it looked both beautiful and terrifying, much like the species it had produced. Class 15 Deathworld, home to humanity. And now, the newest and perhaps most unexpected member of the Galactic Alliance, a civilization born of adversity, tempered by challenge, and ready to bring its unique perspective to the stars.